In a blistering clash that set the GB News studio ablaze, Patrick Christys locked horns with legal commentator Stephen Barrett over the explosive Epping migrant hotel ruling. What began as a sharp exchange over Lord Justice Bean's judgment quickly spiraled into a fiery confrontation filled with accusations of dishonesty, bias, and outright betrayal of ordinary Britons. Barrett's blistering attacks left Christys stunned as the two men tore into each other with claims of lies, hypocrisy, and judicial incompetence. By the end, the studio was gripped in shock, leaving viewers desperate to know who was really telling the truth. Watch the clip.
Did you know over 95% of our viewers aren't subscribed? Subscribing is free and helps us create more great content. Hit subscribe now and join our community.
To join, effectively to relitigate the hearing that they'd had on the Friday. I think he quite rightly said, go trot on. I mean, that's clearly incompetent from the Home Office, but he was criticised for that. And so it was suggested that because he hadn't had the benefit of their wisdom, he had made errors himself. But there's a a very rude logical error that I think your viewers and listeners can go through quite simply. Firstly, they've lumped all the protesters together. Okay, so they bust in Antifa protesters who are clearly, something is behind them, and they are violent and agitators. They're lumped together with the concerned mums that we can see on screen now. Now, that's not fair, and they commit violence. And so the judge has said, all protesters together, and by the way, some of the protesters are violent, so they're all bad. And he said that the judge made a mistake in granting the injunction because that incentivized more protests. Now, that's factually inaccurate, Patrick. After the injunction was granted, they stopped protesting at Epping. So it's just not true. The granting of an injunction did not incentivize more protests.
Oh, Stephen, can I just come in on that? Because I actually think that's a really, really interesting point. I was listening to that ruling, as you would expect, just out here before. And that stood out to me, this idea that, well, we cannot be seen to have protests driving government policy. But I went to Epping, to that Bell Hotel, the day that the injunction was granted, and the only people there were locals. And a lot of women, a lot of younger people. There was no stand-up to racism. There was nothing of it whatsoever. So you are, I believe, right to make the point that actually the protests had stopped, hadn't they? Yes. So that's not a. Do you think that this judge, which we might come on to actually in a second, Lord Justice Bean, might have erred there a little bit?
Yes, I think he has, and I think being very rude to Mr. Justice Eyre, who was the first instance judge, doesn't really cover that up. This is logically irrational. Also, let's just admit it on telly now. The actions of Lord Justice Bean are going to incentivise more protest this weekend. If he's claiming to be the one shutting down protest, that's not what's going to happen. He doesn't seem to understand normal human beings. And I worry that we have a self-selecting elite that simply don't seem to understand ordinary human beings. Obviously, the people in Epping are now going to be really upset. Obviously, they are going to protest. I think they will do so lawfully, because I've seen the good people of Epping, and I think wearing pink T-shirts is very wise. I personally advise them to take chocolate digestive biscuits and to give those to police officers to make it very clear they are angry at disconnected elite figures like Lord Justice Bean, not angry at individual police officers who are just doing their duty and keeping everybody safe. So I think we can have lawful protest, and it's actually a really dishonest and frankly cruel thing for Lord Justice Bean to have done, to lump all the protesters together.
Fine. Now, can I just come in again there? Because actually, yet again, Stephen, I think you make a great point, which is that, look, anyone with a brain in their head is now going to have fears and concerns that an already incredibly tense situation that looked as though maybe there'd been a light at the end of the tunnel dangled in front of people, which has now been snuffed out, could obviously have some consequences. And, every single person wants whatever demonstration or whatever is done, whether it's at the Bell Hotel or anywhere else, in fact, this coming weekend, to be done in a very, very peaceful way. And it's important to make that incredibly clear. And for people not to let themselves down, because a lot of people are going to be out there now waiting for something really bad to happen and use that up as some kind of straw man argument to then tarnish everybody else as well. There is a point that I want to make, and I want to be very, very clear on this before I ask you this question, Stephen. I read an article that you wrote last night. I read it with great interest. And it was about Lord Justice Bean. Now, the thing I want to be clear about is that we have to believe in this country that anybody who is in Lord Justice Bean's position is completely beyond reproach, they are completely neutral, and that their judgment is based, on any case, singularly around their interpretation of the law or just the law itself. So I don't want to be seen like to be implying anything here. But you raise certain questions that about the perception of him and just some facts about his past. And I just wondered if you might be able to just run us through what some of those things were that you noticed.
Yes, so I'm not raising. We have two types of bias in law, and with that, one is actual bias and one is the perception of bias. I'm not saying that there is actual bias. I mean, if anything.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Next UK, your go-to for real stories and sharp analysis.